Welcome to ABCs of Business. Always be compliant. Brought to you by ILSA, Insurance Licensing Services of America. And now here's your host, Doug Foresta.
Hello, and thank you for joining me. This is Doug Foresta, and this is the official podcast of ILSA, Insurance Licensing Services of America. Today, my guest is Robert Tomilson. He is a partner in the insurance practice of Clark Hill in Philadelphia. Robert, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, good morning, Doug. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. And today I know we're going to talk about MGUs and MGAs, and you have a story for us. Maybe first, actually, before we do that, can you just say a little bit about who you, I know I introduced you briefly, but who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm a partner at Clark Hill, which is a national firm. I sit in the Philadelphia office. I have some clients that are local, but a lot of clients which are national and international, and you'll be hearing about two of those today during our discussion.
Great, thank you so much. So let's get into it. I know that you have a really interesting story about a startup company that you work with, and can you share a little bit about that?
I actually have two clients that are Silicon Valley based, and they both started the same way. Both were referrals from other clients. Both were young entrepreneurs, had no insurance background whatsoever, one on the life side and one on the property and casualty side. Each called within a space of about 6 months of each other, and they started with the exact same question or interest. And they said, "Hello, we were referred to you. We'd like to start an insurance company." To which I had to pause. And I said, "Well, tell me what you know about insurance and why you think you want to start an insurance company." What was clear from both of these companies is that they had a platform or wanted to develop a platform for the distribution of insurance products. And that was pretty evident early on, and I told them that. And I said, this is really the method through which you want to go. You really want to be an MGU or an MGA, a producer of insurance products. And I walked them through that, and not just on the first call, but over a series of months, and now it's led into more than a couple of years for both of these clients, which have become very successful.
And so let's say a little bit about also the difference between MGUs and MGAs and how that played into this.
Well, for those who are listening and may not be familiar with the terms, and sometimes even folks within the insurance industry are unfamiliar, MGUs are managing general underwriters. They don't always actually underwrite the products. It may be that they're more just simply a channel or a broker for certain kinds of products. But on the life side, we call them MGUs. MGAs are a more familiar term. That's managing general agents. That's on the P&C side. Again, that's for the distribution and the channeling of insurance products, again, on the property and casualty side.
What kind of challenges did you encounter in setting up the MGUs or MGAs?
Well, for both, they were remarkably similar in this sense. Again, neither client had a great familiarity with the insurance industry. Both were located, not surprisingly, in Northern California. For those listeners on the phone that are familiar with California regulation, it can be a very onerous jurisdiction in which to get licensed. So for both of these entities, we incorporated them as Delaware companies. We made their principal place of business Pennsylvania. And then we proceeded to license them in 50 states. Now, for the bulk of those states, and the process for getting that done, just to be clear, setting up the corporate entity can be done relatively quickly. Getting yourself licensed as a producer within a particular state can vary greatly. In most states, it's about, you call it 2 to 4 to 6 weeks. There's a handful of states, however, where it can take anywhere from 4 to 6 months. And you won't be surprised, Doug, that these Silicon Valley startup companies tend to be very ready to go.
Right.
if I could put it in those terms. Everything needs to be done yesterday.
Yes.
And they wanted to start selling policies within 90 days. I had to tell them that simply was not possible. Dealing with an insurance carrier whose paper they would be distributing, you're not going to be able to convince an insurance carrier to do that. And in any event, you have to be properly licensed to do so. So one of the things I did is I got them obviously licensed initially in a different state. And the purpose of doing that was to get them going. And so, again, we made their principal place of business and their producers were both located in Pennsylvania. We licensed them here. We then got reciprocity in about 30 other states, as I said, between 4 and 6 weeks. The remaining 20 states came in various times, but the last 3 were California, New York, and Florida.
I had a guess. I was going to guess that.
Yeah. So always difficult in dealing with those. And look, they weren't all uniform. There's wrinkles in each one of these states. As you know, and certainly your listeners know, we operate under a 50-state regime, insurance regulatory regime, and it can be very difficult for clients, even large insurance clients or brokers, intermediaries, trying to stay compliant with so many different regimes. And clients call me a lot on these issues when they are confronted with regulators who say that they have infractions of the code. Oftentimes, regulators are not as familiar with the code as you might assume, but we've been able to get both of these companies licensed in all 50 states. And in fact, we've moved their principal places of business back to California once we were fully licensed.
Oh, that's interesting. Was that your intention from the very beginning?
It was. I told them at the start. When we started it, the idea was to get ourselves off the ground and to get ourselves licensed as quickly as possible, to get that reciprocity, and to begin selling policies. But ultimately, these companies, if not at the beginning, certainly within 6 months, 2 years, the raising of capital, the board of directors, the vast majority of its employees would be located in Northern California because they want to have control over the employees that are really managing the business that they've created. And so California would be that place.
What do you see as you talked about sort of the challenges, and I appreciate this is a great, really interesting stuff. What are some of the takeaways that you would have for our listeners who might be in similar situations?
Well, there's a couple of things. I mean, be aware of the fact that, the insurance industry tends to operate slowly and cautiously. As a result, the regulators tend to operate slowly and cautiously. Young entrepreneurs, brokers, agents, and producers that are breaking away from larger entities and want to start their own companies, they're under a lot of time pressure. They've presumably gotten capital, either lent to them or venture capital invested in them, and they need to move quickly, and that was the case with both of my clients. Hire somebody who's knowledgeable, not just an attorney who knows a lot about insurance regulatory advice, but also folks that know the business. The regulations are not always very transparent for how to comply. And so there's a lot of judgment that needs to be used in applying the regs to the business that you are engaging in, especially if your business is innovative or is creative in some way, as is the case with both of my clients in Northern California. Each of them, in different ways, is trying to do something which has not been done before. You won't be surprised. Again, both the carriers themselves are somewhat hesitant to engage in novel transactions. The regulators are even less interested in engaging in novel transactions. And so you need to have the judgment and the experience to be able to make good use of the regs so that you in fact are helping the insurance industry and helping the regulator to get you to a point where they want you to be in business and they want you to be providing the product that you've created for the insurance consuming public out there.
Interesting. So that would be especially, like you said, for an innovative company or startup company. I'm all excited about getting my service out to the market, but it sounds like you're saying the regulators are not always as excited about something that's new and innovative and different.
I think that's probably generally true across the board when you say regulation, but no industry is less interested in innovation than the insurance industry. And look, I say that with some caution. Lots of regulators out there understand that the insurance industry needs to change. It's a world of the internet. It's a world of people being online. People want to buy products online. They want to do it easily. They don't want to be confronted with reams of paperwork, lots of questions to be answered when they're looking to buy a product which may be relatively inexpensive. But, look, there's some risk in being the first one to say, yes, we're going to approve this. And so that's where, again, judgment and experience comes into play, where you're able to both provide a product where the risk is very low, that you're not going to be running up against some regulation that might harm someone, because that's the regulator's job, right? Do no harm. They want to make sure that the investing public or the purchasing public, consuming public, is not injured, and so they tend to be cautious. So the easy way to keep your job and to make sure that you're not on the headlines in a bad way is to just say no. And so persuading them can be difficult, but good relations, a good product, and a sound presentation of what you're doing, in addition to being arguably compliant with all of the regs, can really get you there.
What do you do? I guess this is where the experience comes in, but are there aspects of this where, like you said, there really isn't there's not a black and white sort of chapter and verse that you can quote?
In fact, there's not. You know, I teach a class on insurance regulation at Drexel University Law School, and I always start by telling my students that if the law were nothing other than a clear understanding of a regulation, there would be no reason to have a lawyer. You need to be able to apply some judgment to what it is that the law requires or what a regulation requires. Now, I told you at the beginning of this conversation that one of the things I did is I advised my clients to get licensed in a jurisdiction where I thought it would be quicker and easier to move the process along. On certain products where we have applied for, in terms of forms and filings, made application for a new product, I've actually told them, advised them to go to a very difficult jurisdiction, like California or New York. Here's the reason. If you get New York to say okay to a new product, every other state will follow suit because they know that New York, they're counting on New York being onerous. They're counting on New York looking at it 1,000 times. And so the regulator in Indiana, in Oklahoma, in Montana, may take a great deal of comfort from the fact that a very experienced and large insurance department, financial services department in New York, has blessed the product. So that's one of the ways, you use the regulations actually in your favor, and even when you have a very, what I would call, a department which is very closely scrutinizes innovative transactions.
And I really hear in that too, and you've said this before, that it also sounds like when you're dealing with something like this, it really does help to get some help with this. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to promote myself, but yes, you need to have relationships with the department. You need to be able to convince the department. Look, the department too is pressed. The personnel inside of a department is pressed for time. They don't have a lot of resources. They too want to, in the same way that I said to you that Montana or Indiana might be relying on New York. New York might be relying on the outside attorney that they know, who has told them that this is compliant, that it's good for the consuming public, and that we're following all the regulations that we need to. You want to have that kind of confidence when you walk in the door.
Robert Tomilson from Clark Hill is my guest. Robert, how can people reach you if they want to learn more about you and learn more about Clark Hill?
Well, I think you said my name, Robert Tomilson, attorney at Clark Hill. I can be found on the internet. I suppose if you punch my name into Google, I'll probably come up right away.
And clarkhill.com as well, right?
That is true. Yeah, sorry to be so vague. Yeah, www.clarkhill.com, just like it sounds.
Robert Tomilson, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate your time.
These materials are designed to give general information on the specific subjects covered for educational and discussion purposes only. They are not intended to be a comprehensive summary of the law or exhaustive treatment of the subjects covered. These materials and the related presentation do not constitute legal advice or an opinion, which are provided by Clark Hill only upon engagement and appropriate information analysis with respect to specific factual situations. You've been listening to ABCs of Business, Always Be Compliant, brought to you by ILSA, Insurance Licensing Services of America. ILSA is the insurance industry's regulatory compliance expert. For more information, visit ilsainc.com or call 254-729-8002. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you'll join us for future episodes.